All right, so today I wanted to start by talking about the TikTok nurses. Now, again, they're back in the news again, and for starters, I think that this is kind of something that's blown out of proportion to some degree. But on the flip side, I think it needs to be talked about a lot more because the TikTok nurses, in and of themselves, I don't think is the big issue. I think that the big issue is the ramifications of the TikTok nurses' actions. I think that that's the big issue that I think is something that should be talked about more. Now, in my mind, I think there's two scenarios here. One of them must be true. I think it's more likely to be the second one, but it could be the first one. Um, so there's two scenarios here. Number one, the hospitals are overwhelmed, right? The hospitals are overwhelmed. There's people dying left, right, and center. In which case, number one, how are you finding the time to do this stuff? Because again, if you look at this stuff, this isn't something to people, four or five people get together on their lunch break and do this kind of stuff. A lot of these are things that probably took days, maybe even weeks of planning, right? So this isn't some spontaneous thing you do on your lunch break. So don't try and give me that garbage. Um, so again, if the hospitals are so overwhelmed, number one, where are you finding the time to do this? And number two, it's incredibly disrespectful to the people that are dying that you're just, in the next room that they just died in the hallway, you're doing a TikTok dance, right? It would be the equivalent to, cops showing up to a murder scene or a scene of someone committing suicide and then doing a TikTok dance. Like that would be incredibly disrespectful. Um, so again, if they really are overwhelmed, then they're being incredibly disrespectful. Again, where are they finding the time? So again, that's probably the less likely scenario, but it is possible. The most likely scenario, and I think the one that it is that the hospitals are not overwhelmed, but they are lying to us, or at the very least, they are misleading us. And why is that? Because again, if the hospitals really were overwhelmed, then they wouldn't be finding the time to do this kind of stuff, right? They wouldn't be finding the time to do this kind of stuff. Now, I do think it is fair to point out that a very, very small percentage of hospitals may be at capacity or quote unquote overwhelmed. But again, another big lie that the healthcare industry isn't telling people and these nurses and doctors aren't telling people is that during flu season, which is now, it is normal for hospitals to be running at 100%, 99%, even a little above 100% capacity. Why are they not telling people this? Well, they're not telling people this because they don't want people to know the truth, right? And I think a lot of these people, they're not necessarily bad people. They're not necessarily bad people. I think they're people that they've been told these lies so often that they genuinely believe them. Like, I can't count how many people disagree with pretty much every one of these lockdown, policies and mandates, but yet they go along with it anyway. Why is that? It's because they've been told the lie so often that they believe it. And I think it's the same thing with a lot of these healthcare people. They've been told the lie so many times that the hospitals are overwhelmed that they believe it, right? So, like I say, two scenarios. I think the most likely one is that the hospitals are not overwhelmed. They have lots of time on their hands and they're just basically rubbing it in people's faces. Now, why is this such an important issue? I think, is because we've had very large amounts of people that have had their livelihoods completely taken away, like completely taken away. Now, if you're going to do that, you better have a darn good reason for that. And not, here's the thing. At no point was there a good reason to do this. Looking back on it, there was no good reason to do what we did. There was no good reason. And as time has gone on, the data has shown more and more consistently that the virus is not as much of a threat as people think that it is, or as we originally were told. And so again, why are we going so far on this? Why are we going so far? Well, the reality is, like I say that in these industries, a lot of these people, they just believe the lies, and the average person, they've been told the lie so often that they believe it as well. So again, as far as the TikTok nurses go, the actual dancing itself isn't the big issue. The big issue is that we've had people's livelihoods being completely taken away. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their life savings, People have had family members commit suicide, OD, all this kind of terrible terror, and in a larger amount than people have died from the virus too. Like this is one of the biggest lie we've been told of 2020 is that we're saving lives by doing this. We know we've had more people die of overdoses than we've had of the virus. Suicides way up. Again, we're not saving lives by doing this. Um, so again, those people have been forced to deal with that garbage. Meanwhile, under the guise of the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed, when at no point the hospitals have been overwhelmed. And like I said, I don't think the TikTok dancing itself is the thing that really bothers me and people who are mad at this. It's the sign. It is the fact that it is the sign, I guess, basically. I don't know what the right word is, but it is a comparison that the TikTok dancing is basically an admission that everything we've done has been for completely no reason, like no reason to do any of this garbage. And by garbage, I mean the lockdowns. So, and the other thing I wanted to talk about here, from global news, or one of the other things, is Alberta reports 500 new cases on Boxing Day amid fewer tests. So this is something interesting that I thought it would be a good thing to talk about and a good thing to bring up, because when we're hearing, like, over the last month or two, when we're hearing about all these increased cases, why was it not brought up more that one of the main reasons we're having more cases is because we're simply testing more people? But we're having more cases because we're simply testing more people. If we found a way to double the testing, from where we were at prior to Christmas, we would see a lot more cases as well. But the reality is that the amount of new cases is entirely dependent upon how many people you're testing, right? Like, if we just miraculously said, yeah, we're testing no more than 1,000 people a day going forward, well, the amount of new cases would go down a lot. But does that mean that the amount of people that have it are actually does that affect the amount of people that actually have it? Well, no. And the other big problem, I think, with the whole testing thing is the amount of asymptomatic people that are being discovered. It makes no sense to test asymptomatic people. We don't test asymptomatic people for any other form of illness or virus at all. We don't do that. So when it comes to the testing, the only thing that's going to get me scared of the case numbers is if, number one, we got to bring the PCR threshold down to, like, preferably 25, but 30 at the absolute highest. And number two, we don't test asymptomatic people. We don't test asymptomatic people. Unless you have symptoms, you don't need to be tested. It makes no sense. Now, if you think you may have had it and you develop symptoms, go ahead, get tested. But until then, there's absolutely no reason to do it. So, like I say, when it comes to the whole test things, that people don't realize just how manipulated these numbers can be. People, like, you're talking to people out there, and they were all paranoid about the cases over the last month or so. But again, what they don't tell you is that we were also testing a lot more. We were testing 3 or 4 times more people than we were in the spring. So again, it just makes no sense. Like, it really makes no sense. So the next thing I wanted to bring up here is from No More Lockdowns on Twitter. And they say there's now credible science on masks, and you know what? 5,000 participants in Denmark, controlled, peer reviewed. Difference between groups is 1.8% versus 2.1% infected. Conclusion: masks don't reduce you know what spread. Read, retweet, demand. Now, again, this is something we already knew. It's something we already knew. We already suspected. And again, the big thing they'll tell you is, oh, no, these things were debunked. No, they weren't debunked. This was a new study. And then the new stuff, it wasn't done properly. It wasn't done properly. And this is the thing. When it comes to masks, if they work so well, then why have the cases gone up in places that have had them? I mean, you look at the GTA, you look at, Alberta. Why have the cases gone up? Like, why have the places that don't have mask mandates not have a significant increase in cases as well? I mean, some of them do, but not all of them, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And again, here's the thing, like, when it comes to I think the science isn't as relevant as what some people would have you think, that if you have overwhelming science showing something, but the real world data doesn't show that, then it still makes no sense. Like, it still makes no sense. It doesn't matter how much science you have showing something, that if the real world data contradicts what the studies say, then you have no reason to listen to the studies, right? You have no reason to listen to the studies if the real world data doesn't show that. And that's what we're seeing with the mask stuff, is that the science on masks is largely up in the air. Like, it's you can show studies that show that they work. You can show studies that show that they don't work, like this stuff. Um, but again, if the real world data doesn't show it, then there's no reason to do it. And again, when you point out the fact that to the mask zealots and the lockdown zealots that, oh, how do you explain the fact that the masks have had no effect in Canada? Well, the thing they always tell you is, oh, people aren't wearing them properly. But again, what every one of these idiots told me, because I remember talking to tons of these people back before the mask mandates were put in, every single one of them told me that even if it's a small amount of people wearing masks, that it'll still make a difference. So again, why did they change their minds on that one? Like, why did they change their minds on that one? And here's, I mean, the other thing about masks too is that if they do work, they should be right about that. Even if 50% of people are wearing masks and they work, it should have a positive effect, but it didn't. So there's no data that shows that the mask zealots are right on this one. I'm sorry, there's no data that shows that they're right. This is from Don Bethune on Twitter saying Canadian taxpayers are on the hook for $485 million to help other countries with you know what, as reported today by the CBC. What happened to First Nations clean drinking water funding? This government is a disgrace. Now, again, this is what I pointed out a lot before, that again, the amount of pain and suffering that's going on in Canada, why are we giving taxpayer money to foreign countries? It makes no sense whatsoever. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? I really don't get it. I really don't get it. Like, I've never heard of a good argument for it. If we have, and here's the thing, if we have wages going up, if we have 3% unemployment, by all means, maybe we can consider it then. And I would say consider it. But until that happens, it makes no sense. Now, why is the government doing what the government's doing? It is because they want to buy off their crony friends. I mean, Justin Trudeau loves his globalism and his UN garbage. Of course, he's going to give money to these friends of his. And here's the thing: when it comes to foreign aid, a lot of that money ends up in the hands of the rich people in these other countries. If foreign aid works so well, then why is poverty such a huge issue in a lot of these countries still, even though trillions of dollars has been poured into these areas? Like, trillions of dollars has been poured into Africa. Has things gotten much better there? Not really. Maybe a little bit, but not really. The reality of it is that no matter how much you do in a lot of these areas, you're not going to make a significant difference. You're not going to make a significant difference in a lot of these areas. That's the sad truth. And like I say, that even if foreign aid made a significant difference, there's still no reason to do it when we have so much pain and suffering going on locally. How can you possibly make an argument for that? How can you possibly make an argument for that? I don't know. I really don't know. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I say, check out those links. Stay tuned for more and have a good day.